a lot of work to support both Indian American students in the US as well as Indian students in the US as well as Indian students in India. He has his ear to the ground, particularly backed by degrees which he's acquired from Oxford, Columbia, NYU, all centered around international relations. And he's going to share with us today a lot of insights from the ground on what we can look forward to and expect with the outcome of the current US election, the change in sentiment, and how our hopes and dreams of making our American dream actually become closer reality now. And will hopefully clear away any doubts that we may have given the outcome, given the events that have unfolded over the last several months with all the executive orders and bans and visa restrictions. So while we all aspire to go to the US, we're still holding back for various reasons. And Sudhanshu is going to help clear some of those for us. So over to you, Sudhanshu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aradhana. Well, I think it's evening time in India. It's my morning, 8:30. So good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And I just to kind of give a little bit more of an introduction to myself, just so I can relate a little bit better, is I am actually currently also a student. I'm getting my JD MBA, which is a law degree / an MBA here in the United States. While I do that, and I'm obviously Indian, while I'm doing that, I also run what Aradhana had mentioned, North American Association of Indian Students. So I have a great perspective, I would say, from a not just grassroots or on top, but from someone that as a student, but also in a way where, and I wouldn't say activist, but someone that's working on these larger policy issues as well. And that's kind of what I want to convey to you all today within this event is, what does it mean to be an Indian student studying in the United States? What are the prospects? What are we really thinking about? What are we hearing? And what we hope the future will be, because it's been bright beforehand. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. I hope all of you can start seeing it in now. And I will go on and off and go from there. So I want to start off actually with the Open Doors 2020 report that released 2 days ago. We got the actual data a day ago. And so this is something that's very timely, very pertinent to what's happening now. Now, if you all do not know what the Open Doors Policy Report is, it's basically something that's sponsored. It's a private public partnership between the US Department of State and produced by the Institute of International Education. And it just exhibits and details a lot about what's happening with international students. Now, in this report, there were things that we do know. For example, India has always placed in the top 2, top 3 in the past, decade or so of how many international students are coming. This year, 35% were Chinese, 18% were Indian, and 53% in total are from China and India. So these are heavy numbers. And when you think about, the third that comes in, it's South Korea at 5%, or Saudi Arabia at 3%. So we know this, a lot of Indian students come. What's shocking, but also kind of expected at this point, is that international students and the rate of incoming international students in the United States dropped this year. And quite literally, this doesn't show it explicitly, but in terms of new enrollment, so people coming in for the first time to the United States to enroll, dropped 43% from last year. That's a huge number. And when you think and break it down nationality-wise, 4.4% of students dropped out or decreased from India that were coming to the United States. And that is a huge number. Personally speaking, it's worrisome because we had a decade-long worth of growth, meaning that the rate of incoming students from India was growing for the past 9 to 10 years substantially. We were thinking at one point, could we kind of overtake China? But that has decreased. Now, what's interesting to see is that Chinese international students incoming to the United States this year increased 1%. So, there could be, and obviously we know a variety of issues especially the pandemic, etc. But it seems as if that hasn't affected Chinese students, but adversely affected Indian students. So that's something that we're looking at and thinking about. But I thought it was super important to see because it kind of reaffirms what we've been thinking about, what the impact will be, what we've been seeing, but also just the sheer fact that this is quite damaging in terms of numbers, and that's where we currently are with the pandemic. So I kind of want to start off with, what have Indian students faced while being in the United States? Um, and there's been a lot that's been happening. You all have heard about primary example, the student ban, which there was a significant amount of confusion about. What was going to happen? What did it entail? Could international students come to the United States? Now, this was proactively created for political purposes by the Trump administration. And it adversely affected the sentiments, the hope, and truly was, I would say, a big barrier for international students, specifically Indian students, in deciding when and where they would come. And now this came in the middle of the summer. So when the pandemic crisis was at its peak, but also when people were paying their first deposits or their second deposits or getting off wait lists. So I think that adversely impacted a lot of people who would have come. I'm pretty sure you all are aware of the fact that the student ban was then contested in court, repelled. Yet the Trump administration, since the student ban, has actively tried to do little things that haven't really caught up in terms of media as much, but they have been proactively talking, discussing, breaking down, and to make things harder. So, for example, I don't know if you've heard, but because of the certain restrictions that the Trump administration made outside of the student ban, Harvard's incoming international first-year students could not actually come to the United States. Now, this wasn't just Harvard, it was many other schools, and that wasn't just specifically targeted towards Harvard. It was the fact that Harvard took a policy decision university-wide to not allow students on campus because of the pandemic. Now, they did not have a problem with students coming in, but the Trump administration, within their mandate, enforced that students that could not attend at least 1 to 2 classes in person, so not the hybrid model, would not be allowed in. That was not contested in court because that was in the mandate of the Trump administration, Department of Homeland Services, and Harvard had to, make sure and tell their international students that they wouldn't be on campus, nor would they be allowed in the country. Now, this was the case in many other colleges that went in, and many colleges didn't have to do that because they offered that hybrid model, and you saw a lot of students also coming back and forth. And in the next semester, you'll see that. But I just want to, put emphasis on this, that we do expect this to happen again, especially during the spring term. So if they're still continuing, as other colleges have and are deciding to continue either hybrid models or online courses, we still have a Trump presidency until January 20th. So please be aware that your spring semester might also be impacted and affected, and you might have, if people are thinking or going, might have heard about that, and will have that. Just be cognizant of that might impact, and be in constant communication with your university. So that was the student ban issue that has passed, but we're kind of still suffering through some partials. There are also strains of that, OPT, et cetera. We can go into that later. That's being contested. The Department of Homeland Services has asked changes to that. We can get into that later. The second was obviously the pandemic. The pandemic was a huge issue that really, I think, showcased the cleavages, not just all around the world and obviously in India, as you all are going through it, but specifically within the higher education system here in the United States. People were asked to leave their campuses. People didn't have places to go. NAAS really was proactive in trying to provide food, aid, support, and security to these Indian students throughout the pandemic, and throughout that really shaped these students up quite a bit. So this pandemic has showcased these cleavages, especially Indian students who had to go back and forth. Some of those students are starting to come back. there are now preemptive measures in place if this happens, if this doesn't happen. And I think now that universities are prepared for it, especially the ones that do expect a higher increase of international students. But I wanted to make sure and talk about that as well. Is one of the things that Indian students have had to face in the past 6 to 8 months. And then what I think is super important, it's a little bit political, but I think all of you need to be cognizant of this because this is what we deal with directly, is for the first time in America's history, is international Indian students become political targets, right? And what I mean by that is not just through policy of welcoming or not welcoming enough. See, what I like to say is that while America, the foundational stones of America, the United States, were built by slaves, were built by immigrants, they were built by suffragists, a lot of, community civic leaders. But the United States has progressed, especially in the 20th and 21st century, because of international students, those that have come to this country, that have, educated, have prospered well, and contributed to its society, and the institution's, reputation as well all over the world. So that has been the image, the identity that international students have created. There are obviously some sort of subtle tensions beforehand, but nothing to the point where international students became targets. And that, I think, is where we were and still are at this point during this entire election cycle. We were following this closely, and almost every other day we would hear the president go to a rural area in the United States where there are a lot of college towns. Now, just to give you some basic demographics, Indian students are legitimately spread everywhere, right? Currently, NAIS has affiliations with students from people from Alabama, states like Minnesota, from Montana, and obviously we have high density among New York, California, Texas, etc. But basically, we're spread out everywhere, and that means that we have more coverage in that phase. We have a little bit more of a risk too, because we are faced with society that isn't as accepting in New York or California or in Florida, where we're in the middle of Louisiana or Alabama or Idaho. And the thing was, what we were seeing is that when the Trump administration would take these rallies, there were a few instances where he would call out and instigate the crowd against international students, saying that he was protecting their jobs, which, by the way, is a false notation, but we won't get into that. And there were instances of him actually saying that elect him to help protect your jobs, to keep away the international students during this entire thing. He called out that he gave this student ban. So all this provided a very, a sentiment of being unwelcomed in some parts of America. And that adversely affects more Indian students rather than any other students because we are so spread out. I've spoken about this many times, but it's scary to see someone for political gains use international students that range from 17 to 18 to 25, 26, 27, you name it, as political scapegoats. Now, also H-1B visas and that entire mess is something different, and his record differentiates when it comes to employment, et cetera, whatever. But specifically, students were becoming a political target at one point, and also a certain income wage earning international working demographic as well. So that is where we were, right? And I know that doesn't sound too good, and you must be wondering why come study in the United States. I think that there's no better time to come study in the United States. And the reason why is because we've always been at the cusp. When I say we, the higher education system in the United States has always been at the cusp of innovation, of progress. And I think that especially when you think about and when you compare whether it's the United Kingdom, whether it's Australia, whether it's India itself or the United States, education systems here have really increased and engaged and kind of revolutionized how they're interacting and conducting international education and education in general within their campuses, right? So they have provided these measures that I am in conversation with students that I know, my friends that are still at the University of Oxford or elsewhere. I have people that I'm connected with organizations in Australia. But the realm, and I completely say this knowing that the United States also has the highest rate of COVID cases, but still, with the realm of that possibility, there has been so many innovations and safety measures that have been taking place within the United States on these campuses, especially the campuses which have a large and always increasing international student population, that I think that things are looking upward with that. There have been several studies that have come out that have stated actually that for example, one of our chapters at affiliations is at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And there's been a 0.02% increase of COVID cases, whereas the state itself has skyrocketed, but the campuses have been so siloed and they've done such a great job at it. I just want to reassure that the universities are being proactive. And for the first time, it feels like that tuition money is being put to good use. Personally speaking, I get tested at my university every 2 weeks from my home. They do a saliva test, etc. So they have been a lot of emphasis being put on that. So that being said, pandemic put aside, I want to just talk about, so what's next, right? What do we expect, and what are we hoping for that'll come out with this? So again, so Joe Biden wins. You've all heard of that. How does that impact international students? And I'm going to quickly go through this. I don't know why. So first of all, visa and immigration, right? There were a multitude of challenges to international students. And then on top of that, policy issues. So one thing that you need to understand and realize is that Biden has gone on record to suggest that they will bring a halt to continuous chain of proposed ICE rules and regulations, right? So that means that not just the student ban, but the OPT issues about trying to break down in terms of how much income they were making. So a lot of students who come here that are, thinking of how do they actually pay back the loans that they've taken, or make some money to kind of facilitate how much money has been put in their education. Be considerate of that the Biden presidency has said that they will stop these proposed changes. Now, does that mean that until January 20th, these changes will be there? Yes. But you can expect the Biden presidency to keep those at halt. And it's not just the student ban. It's these smaller issues that haven't gotten much media coverage that will adversely affect them if they were continuously put on. But also, the Biden presidency, and I'm not saying this as, this is a political support kind of presentation. It's not. It's just sheer facts of what Biden has said and what the Trump administration has put in policies. And we want to showcase this to you. So one of the biggest things that they've said is within the COVID relief package is there will be low-income international student relief, because that was something that wasn't given within the first 5 to 6, 7 months. And that's something that's really important. So when we come about work permits and working after graduation, now this is all taken from the Biden manifesto and then the transition team website. So this is exactly what they have said and what they tend to do. So first of all, they've domestically observed foreign students be actively engaged in the American workforce. So anything against work permits like OPT, the rollback on that will be taking place. And there has been, relaxing country caps that Biden has promised, and an easier way for highly skilled Indian students to not just immigrate and study in the United States, but to also reside post their education. And also, which is really interesting here, is that there's been talks about an increased protection for foreign workers, which you don't see much. You don't see a political leader saying that so proactively, but Biden has gone on record to say that they will be. So feel rest assured that for this administration has been proactively been thinking about international students, not just when they study here, but more importantly, what is the future, and how stable of a future can they have, and likely of it is it for them to get a job. So I did want to kind of reflect on that. Now I'm going to go really quickly about on this, but the fight against COVID, I was talking about it. There's a comprehensive plan that really takes into the issue of international students, but also just international travel. And then the relief part of it that wasn't available in the previous year that they are talking about. Health insurance is super, super important, right? And it's something that we have seen a lot of Indian students not be aware of. When they come here, a lot of Indian students were really, really, there was anxiety, nervousness, because if you get this, virus, but also if your health suffers, where do you actually go? Will your student insurance cover it? So one of the things was with the Biden administration is that obviously you'll have lower premiums, increasing coverage, but international students are likely to be covered well within their university health insurance, but within this virus, availability to the vaccine, tests, etc., will be more covered, and that's what we've heard. So that's something that you should be thinking about as well if you're coming here in the spring term or post, even in August. It's something that we're going to have to live with, and that students should have access to vaccine. Now, I don't know if this pertinently is true, but some of the universities are also considering providing vaccines when it releases to their student population and demographics within their campuses. So if that is truth, and I don't think it'll be available in every university, but the universities that will be providing that will be a huge, huge, huge boost to the morale, but also in terms of getting these students back on campuses, which is what these universities want. They are willing to invest because in the larger scheme of things, this is, the best suited interest for both the students, but also the university as a business model too. And then obviously I wanted to talk about this, about the Indian American community and cross-country ties, which is super important, and that they're, really thinking about strategic partnerships, not just on a policy level, but with the Indian community. And as you all know, 2 to 3 lakh people, or 200 to 300,000 people, are made up of just Indian students here in the United States. So it's a huge demographic when you think about it. Almost 10% of the entire Indian American and Indian population, right? So just made by only Indian students between the ages of 18 to I think the last was 24 or 25, etc. So it's a huge demographic. So that's something that you all need to be thinking about and understanding. Now, that being said, these were the policies that were in place. We are hopeful that they will take place and change up. But there's always something about symbolism, I believe, right? That, your intent should be there. You can keep making policy, but symbolism matters, especially identity matters. And what we're really proud to see right now, and I think all of you should be proud to see as well, is that within the Biden transition, what we see is, for the first time, the transition team has 23 Indian origin members, many of whom were first, here coming to the United States as international students. So many of the people like you who, eventually will come to the United States or already here are actually part of this transition team. And it's, first of all, transition teams, help decide not just the individuals who will be within these departments and leading them, but they also decide the framework, the 4-year plan of how each department functions, what will the primary key objectives of these departments will be. And to see 23 Indian origin members is welcoming, and to see the prospect that many of these people were not born in the United States, were not brought up in the United States. They came for education, many of them, whether it was undergraduate or graduate, and now have been able to be so productive in American society, is that the president of the United States has enlisted them to create the next 4 years to 8 years of what their departments will look like. And, I think a lot of them deserve special mention. So, we just have this list of all these Indian origin members, many of them, again, international students that first came here, in all these different departments, whether it's Department of Education, Department of Energy, Homeland Services, Department of Justice, Department of Commerce. There's such a huge density of Indians here. Department of Labor, Department of Statement, Federal Reserve, NASA, National Security Council, Office of Management and Budget, Office of National Drug, Personal Management, Science and Technology, trade representatives, USAID, USPS, in other ways that basically in every department there is Indian representation. And that, goes to showcase that Indian students are not just welcomed here, but they will be accepted here and they will be able to thrive here. And I think that, like I said in the beginning, there was a lot of insecurity here. But with this election, but also with the universities having a game plan for COVID, there's a lot of prospect here. And I think that we are optimistic of what will happen. And we are optimistic of the potential of just, your future as well, not just as a student, but afterwards as well. If you have any questions, obviously I'll be answering specific questions, but always you can reach out to me on social media and through our organization as well. Radna, that's it for me on my end.
Sorry, I just needed to unmute myself. Okay, super. Thank you, Sudhanshu, for that. I think there are lots of questions, particularly that students would want to know around the OPT, this CPT status, this 3-year STEM status, H1B. Would you like to talk about that in general, Sudhanshu?
Sure.
And
so
questions?
One of the things about the OPT statuses were that the Trump administration, Department of Homeland Services, in the beginning of last month, put out a memorandum and a welcoming of questions and concerns of basically a policy proposal that would change the way OPT works. So right now, it's basically a lottery system, right? After the 1 to 2 years that you are confirmed if you get a job, it's a lottery system of getting that H-1B and also that extension. What they wanted to do to the OPT, so right now, any student has a 1-year guarantee of being able to work within the United States. Post that, for a STEM extension, you get an extra additional year to 2 years to work as well. A lot of schools started providing STEM degrees, a lot of business schools, undergraduate, etc., to do that. What happened is the beginning of I think last month, the Department of Homeland Services said instead of it being for over everyone and also it being a random draw with the H-1B that follows the OPT, they were going to change the salary cap and change it to something basically that meant that a employer had to provide a certain level of salary to the student to qualify for that OPT extension. And then also, not it just being a random draw of H-1B, which is exactly what it is now, which a lot of people hate, a lot of people love because it genuinely is a random draw. They were going to also make that salary specific as well. Now, some people said this is a great thing. Some people say it's actually bad because then the employer is less incentivized to actually, give you a job because they would have to pay more for the international student rather than a domestic applicant, and it tilts the favor towards the domestic students. This is the objective of what Trump wanted, and it caused a huge uproar. Now, this policy until now took in what they're mandated to do, questions, concerns within the public. A lot of organizations, including ours, resented it, took our frustration out, suggested our comments and concerns. But the thing is that there's still until January 20th when the Trump administration can do this. So I want to be clear, is that we might just have that OPT policy enacted until January 20th. Looking at what the Trump administration is doing right now, CNN is playing in the background, and you see, there are petty attempts to, make sure that the agenda is fulfilled at the last minute. Now, what we can take comfort in is even if this policy agenda is enacted, the Biden administration has gone on record to say that they will reenact and renege all these OPT changes that have taken place, including the H-1B. So please know and understand that for the OPT thing, because I think it's something that's happening as we speak. So making a comment, discussing it right now, I don't think is that fruitful, because it's literally changing every day. And we might just see it being enacted. I understand that he will enact it for a short period of time, and that will be reneged once the new administration is is sworn in. But we have to keep the pressure up. So we as an organization will constantly campaign the Biden administration to do this, and be proactive and listen to that as well. So that was for the F1. Sorry, for the OPT. What else was there? I'm sorry.
So
Should I just?
Sudhanshu, related to all of this, but I think I just want to take this time to summarize that while the Trump administration is going to continue to enact its agenda, as you've stated, till Jan 20th, given that Biden has gone on record to say that the US is the land of immigrants, anything which was negative and adverse, which may get enacted before Jan 20th, will get revoked once the Biden administration actually settles in. So the message that we want to give our students and our audience out there is that there's 2 more months of a little bit of flux and to hang in there, but everything should get better. And there are questions specifically around comments made by the Biden administration on removing country caps for green cards, and I know there's no country cap for student visas. So is there enough that has been stated which you could share, which would give people that confidence that they are going to put their money where their mouth is, because these kind of policy initiatives have already been openly discussed, publicly discussed and shared?
Look, there are two ways that you can figure out what Biden is thinking. Either, a primary source, meaning him or his team, making statements, going on record to say it. And two is the manifesto that they put. And in both, as I, shared before, and you can go on, Biden's manifesto, et cetera, he's been proactive in securing the future of foreign workers in the United States, but also international students. And the country cap that you've discussed has been something that's been discussed within the Biden transition team, but also what Biden has gone on record on saying. And there's talks about removing that. So I think that if they publicly say that on record, the intent is there, and we'll figure out what happens specifically. And I think, again, like you said, that the hope is there that these things will be. And what I can confidently say is that this administration will be 100% more proactive in ensuring that the stability and the future of international students here in the United States is protected, because they understand the prospects that international students come here, and the engagement, but also what they give to society here as well. And this has been, whether it's rhetorical, whether it's through policy, whether it's through placing people in their transition team showcased throughout. So one thing is that while we can't sit and figure out and give you an answer for when will this be replaced or when will this country cap go away, no one can, including any visa official in these embassies. No one knows when that will happen or how will that happen, and what will happen within these 2 months, by the way. So not just what happens after January 20th, but what happens between now to January 20th. What we can say is that this incoming administration will proactively be friendlier in securing these rights. So please be rest assured in that. And I wouldn't just say that if I wasn't sure enough either.
Absolutely. And I think what underscores this is that the vice president-elect herself is the daughter of 2 international students, as well as the first lady who works in the higher education sector, so understands the value and the pain of international students both. So I think there's enough evidence on the ground that we all need to only look forward and be hopeful. But there is, of course, that concern, Sudhanshu, which students are voicing right now in the chat, that there is a Biden administration and they start their journey and their career as a student, and then the administration changes and again become, what if an anti-international student administration comes back? How should they be thinking about this? Or is that too far into the horizon for them to be worrying about today?
Look, I think especially right now, the students that are going to be applying and attending school, let's say in the fall or in the next incoming class, I think you're in good time and emphasis here because look, even within the Trump administration, the first 2 years were not targeted towards international students, right? It really happened when the next election cycle came around, meaning in 2020, end of 2019, when students were being proactively targeted. Now there are, influxes and of how many visa approvals they're giving and not giving, et cetera. That happens. But I think that there is a significant amount of confidence that for this incoming class and the next few incoming classes, be rest assured that for your visa and for what has been offered to you and stated, there will be that. Now, I can't say that 100% confident that the next administration will also be as engaging and as next, not the incoming, but the next incoming administration will as proactive as, let's say, a Biden-Harris administration. But what we can say is that hopefully there are things in place by that time to instill that people that are coming to the United States that have invested so much will not, go away haphazardly because of recent policy changes that adversely affect them. And that's something that we will also be thinking about and working on to make sure that that isn't impacted. So, and also, I think that you also have to understand. I'm seeing a few questions about Biden stepping down, all these things. Don't worry about that. It's not just the individual Biden himself; it's the administration that's being put in place. We are hearing, hundreds and hundreds of names popping up. Indian Americans, Indians who will be taking spots in their administration, in not just the department figureheads, but in so many areas. This administration just doesn't stop with Biden, Harris, but many others, is pro-friendly, pro-immigrant, pro-student, international students. So I think that, and again, if Biden steps down, Harris or whomever it may come afterwards, this administration was proactively for Indian students. So there's nothing to fear about that, and we shouldn't be psyched down by that in its ability. What you need to understand that this administration is resending and actively on record stating that anything that the Trump administration has put when it comes to international students, they will negate that. They will resend that legislative offer, and that's all that we need to really take in. I'm also reading the questions. One of the bigger things was the fact about F1 influxes. Look, that's an influx, and it depends on your what I would think and what I've heard, your own application and your university application. I've never heard of a visa being denied to a credible institution here in the United States. Now there are institutions that are not credible that happens, and we've heard cases take place of that institution. In this administration, ICE was very proactive in trying to target those unaccredited institutions where people were on an F1 visa but actually working instead of seeing the structure. But look, if you're here in this webinar, you're most likely to go to an institution that is credible, that has accreditation, and I think, if you're here, your profile fits the match that there is no chance of it being denied. So we shouldn't be worrying about that. The United States does actually understand that $44 billion comes from international students. They're not just going to let that go for the sake of it. They want you here, and you need to understand that you are welcome if you follow the legal procedures and laws as well.
There's a question around the validity of the extension that STEM students get. And there's also a related question that are the career prospects for non-STEM students as strong? Sudhanshu.
Yeah, so in terms of the non-STEM students, obviously, there are many ways, and from what we know, I live in New York. It's the financial capital of the United States, so there are a lot of people with that STEM backing that get in Indian students specifically, that are able to get their jobs. But even in non-STEM backgrounds, there is obviously a demand for those workers. I mean, it increases the difficulty, but they're being accepted. Right now, we just had a student who, this is very out there, but graduated with an art degree from the Savannah School of Art and Design. She's an NAAIS member, and she just got hired by a art house here in New York, right? So that's completely opposite from STEM degrees, and she was able to do that. And there are also flexibilities, and you hear a lot that, startups won't fund you, but I just want to let you know that if you are willing to pay for those, basically the sponsorship fees and basically rules, startups are willing to hire you if you know them. We have 3-4 examples that I can speak on a personal experience where they were able to get basically if they paid the fees associated with it, and were able to get that employment from them, even though they weren't advertised as extensions or visa employment guarantees and all that stuff. So there are options, I would say, that I've personally seen that people have worked around. And obviously a lot of this also depends on the global economy and what we can say. And I'm not an economist, and I know Aradhna, as skilled as you are, probably are also not an economist. So we can't foresee what will happen in the next 2 to 3, 4 years in terms of the job market. What we can just talk about the present and what's happened in the past is, yes, it is difficult. There's always competition. It's not easy, but there are a lot of possibilities. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do actually is have conversations with people that have been able to navigate the system, not just by the lottery system, but what I'm talking about, the startups and being able to sponsor themselves and pay for that. And so to rest assure all these Indian students who are putting that emphasis is they can get that employment guarantee and all that stuff. More questions?
That's helpful, Sudhanshu. I think there's a specific question which I'll quickly address, which asks about getting into universities with only IELTS. And if there is a waiver for the GRE, several universities have become test optional, test neutral, test blind. So yes, those options exist. Please check with specific universities that you're interested with, or do reach out to anyone in our team. The contact information has been shared right now on the screen as we speak. There's a specific question. I think perhaps we don't know if it's a rumor or fact. Sudhanshu, if you can speak to that will Biden be increasing taxes for international students? And I'm not sure what kind of taxes really are applicable right now. So do you want to address that?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. International students don't really pay taxes. I mean, you pay sales tax, but that's everywhere, right? So there's no certain tax that's applied, and there's been nothing of that, nothing of that issue being talked about, and it just doesn't make sense. So these are rumors that have been circulating, about. All you need to know is that this administration, the incoming administration, is proactively friendlier, and there won't be, a policy decision to the taxes once we start earning. So I think the taxes that you're talking about might be for an income class that is way well above beyond what any of us earn right now. That's $450,000. That's the income tax that that has been talked about, and that doesn't really apply to us. I hope you all earn $450,000 as well, but as students and graduating, no, that hasn't been spoken about, and there's no way to specifically target. So once you start earning and saying, hey, you will face a higher income tax because you were an international student, right? So I think that these are just rumors. The only thing about increasing income tax is for the highest 1%, which they have said. And yeah, one thing I just wanted to note down is, while a lot of these college applications, et cetera, can be answered by Aradhna and her team, once you're here, there is a big need to create a community here to understand. And while they have done the first part of getting you here, we are an organization that's here to create that community, to help answer these questions and these concerns, and to give you a sense of security that there are other people that have gone through this, and that we're here for them. So please do, if you are already enrolled, if you're thinking about join as a student member on NAAS.org, to have that sense of security as well.
Thanks, Sudhanshu. There's a specific question about can state administrations undermine any of the policies of the national administration, or do we have to consider state policies of the universities as well as a national one? I think in India there's a lot of state policies versus the central government policies. I don't know if that applies.
Right. No, that's a really good question if you think about it. But the federalist structure here in the United States differs from India, but also even in India, when it comes to foreign policy issues and international education, That is a mandate of the national policy. So you can't see, Alabama, which is a red state, creating a different kind of, policy for its universities within its state. And the university itself is still a business model, right? They still want your tuition money. They are still willing to give you scholarships. So they're not going to proactively make it difficult for you to come. Uh, if you have the merits and if you have the viability, obviously they want you there. So the national policy that's been set is applied to every international student, and the visas that's dealt with will also be the same. And that's similar to India as well, if you think about it in that way. So yes, no red states, Republican states will change up their policies and not let you come. That doesn't happen. That's not within the mandate, within the constitutional limitations for these states to do.
Yeah, I think there's a specific question around the 4-year undergrad degree. And there are several universities which have dual programs. So you can do a combined master's and undergrad degree in 5 years or lesser. And I think the way it works, Sudhanshu, please add, is that you have to complete a minimum number of credits to graduate. If you're able to complete those credits in a shorter duration than 4 years, you can still graduate. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's all about the credits and specifically what degree you're doing. Some degrees you start in your 3rd or 4th year. Some you have to stay back and fully do. So it just depends on the institutions, and there are so many dual degrees available.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have the answer to this one, Sudhanshu, that are the grants for PhD students not be funded for fall 2021 in US?
So we have been looking into this actually. There have been a lot of PhD programs that have stopped intaking. So it's not going to be funded or not. What we have seen is that there are many departments all over that have stopped intaking PhD applicants, right? So they are not taking it. So for example, Columbia's South Asia department is not taking anyone for the fall of 2021 intake, or NYU's history department. There are many that are. So for example, Columbia's political science department is still taking that, right? So there are a variety of institutions that are not taking in any more students. But the students that will be taken, it is assumed that they will get that aid that they effectively get. And why they're trying to do that is to give more attention to the students that are already there, to provide them more aid. So it's literally what we've seen. The model is, if they don't have enough funding, it's not that they're going to give less funding, it's that they're going to just not take any more students in for this incoming year. And they're expected to start back up next year, which means that the cycle you'll apply in is late December, etc., of 2021.
Yeah, because universities clearly are going through their own post-pandemic financial crises, which they're battling with. So I'm sure there are funding issues for sure. There's a question about whether the political change will affect the startup ecosystem in the US.
Honestly, look, this is these are a lot of these questions that have to do with geopolitics and all these things. Is what I can think of, and this is a layman's opinion. The scene is quite vibrant and strong. So I don't know if there's going to be a depression that comes in, or a recession, etc. That isn't up to me, and I don't know what's expected. But the transition that's happened, the startup scene still thrived when Trump's administration came, or previously when Obama's administration first came. And it'll be the same because this is pro-friendly. I mean, think about that Silicon Valley does elect a majority Democratic representatives, and there have been a lot of people that backed Biden that are members of these large tech companies and the tech sector. So I think that they're proactively thinking that this will continue to be the same, or help them even more. So I don't think this has that impact on.
Yeah. I'm just trying to read through the questions to see which one hasn't been answered as yet. There's a question which, I don't know if we have enough information on that, Sudhanshu, which says that the Biden administration has stated that STEM PhDs may be given green card on their completion. Is this a fact?
I haven't heard about this, and I won't speak to it. I mean, if you're looking into this, then you might probably know much better. But I can't comment on exactly that. What I do know is that, again, they're trying to take off these caps. They're trying to make sure, and has talked about making sure that international students can come in and have access not to just education but also work. So the next question was chances of getting H-1B and all that stuff. Look, they're more proactively trying to make it easier to do so as such as well. So I can't specifically say that STEM PhDs will get green cards. I think there's an entire process you have to apply to do so. But be rest assured that when it comes to work and employment, all those things will be, if not the same, but better.
So all in all, I think there's good news around the corner. We waited this far, a little more, and things will get a lot more clarity. And yes, overall, the Biden administration is a lot more positive and open for international students, for encouraging those who want to make America their home also make their dream become a reality, apart from making the American dream a reality for existing Americans. And that has to do with a lot more than just employment. It has to do a lot with social justice and racial bias and things which are outside the purview of our discussion today. So everybody who aspires to go to the US, whether it's for your undergrad or your postgrad degree, there's a ton of opportunities. The best institutions in the world are in the US even today, despite all that may have happened. And it's water under the bridge, which has flown by. So we should only look forward, look ahead. For any questions which are more specific in nature, please do reach out to us. And Sudhanshu, thank you so very much for taking time to speak with all of us today. I know this has been very, very helpful. We look forward to having you with us periodically.
Yeah, I
you
just
take
wanted
care. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to, for students, that there were very specific questions when it came to H-1B, et cetera, issues that were coming up. NAAS is doing an event. This is primarily geared towards actual Indian students already sitting here, but regardless, and we're getting immigration lawyers and journalists and people that follow the immigration student visa beat to do an event on what the Biden transition and the Biden team means for students and international students. So please look forward to that. Sign up and you'll get information about that, or follow us on social media.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Sudhanshu. Bye.